This wasn't a dark alley. This wasn't at night. This was a woman in her father's home. A 21-year-old mother, Bipni Bala, had come with her 2 young children. Just a visit, just a chance to breathe. Her father's house was supposed to be safe. That's what we tell women, right? That home is the safest place to be. That nothing bad can happen when you're with family. But on June 26, 2025, someone shattered that belief. Faizer Ali wasn't a stranger. He was a local political figure, a BNIP leader known in Kumila. He didn't break in because he was hungry. He didn't force his way in because he was desperate. He came for power, control, entitlement, and he brought a knife. Bipni said no. With her voice, with her fear, her children were right there. And he raped her anyway. This is where we begin. In a room that should have been safe, with children sitting nearby, and still, a man decided he could take what he wanted. How can any of us call this rare when it happens behind closed doors every day? Her story is not a headline. It's a scream still echoing. If this story already has you holding your breath, pause and subscribe. We don't tell these stories for shock. We tell them because silence has never saved us. And we asked, if a woman isn't safe in her father's house with her children right there, where is she safe? Bipni Bala was 21, a Hindu woman, a mother of 2, and someone who had known more struggle than safety. She was visiting her father's house in Ramchandrapur, Panchkita village, not to party, not to escape responsibility, just to rest, maybe to find some peace, maybe to feel like a daughter again instead of carrying the whole world on her back. Her children were still so small. They needed her for everything: food, safety, comfort. She was all of it, a walking shelter. Her life, like many women's lives, was built around protection of others, and she didn't ask for much, just time to breathe. But too often, when women try to rest, the world breaks in. This time, it came in the form of a man who saw her stillness not as something sacred, but as something he could take. Bipni wasn't some statistic. She was young, hopeful, trying to build a life. And she was already doing what most people can't even manage: surviving. That's who she was before that man forced himself in. She deserved to be remembered not for what was done to her, but for how she lived. As a mother, a daughter, a woman who should have been able to lie down in peace without fearing what the door might let in. Why is it that when women try to rest, the world breaks in? Faizer Ali wasn't desperate. He wasn't unknown. He wasn't hiding in shadows. He was out in the open, a local leader with ties to the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. He carried himself like a man who knew the rules didn't apply to him, because they often didn't. That's the thing about predators who hide behind politics. They use power like a shield. They assume silence will follow their violence. And most of the time, it does. That's why they keep going. Faizer Ali didn't see Bipni as a person. He saw her as something he could claim. That kind of thinking doesn't come out of nowhere. It grows in systems that allow men like him to rise, unchecked, and stay there. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a crime of entitlement. A man with status, used to getting what he wants, decided he wanted Bipni, and so he took her. People like Faizer Ali don't fear consequences. They fear exposure, and even then, only because it threatens their comfort, not their conscience. He brought a knife because he never planned to listen. He didn't need to. He believed power would protect him, the way it always had. What makes a man believe that if he wants a woman, he can just take her? It was supposed to be a quiet day, her children nearby, the kind of moment most mothers long for: normal, uneventful. Until it wasn't. Faizer Ali forced his way into the house. There was no warning, no conversation, just the flash of a knife and the terror that follows it. A knife says everything a predator doesn't need to speak. It says, stay silent, don't fight, you won't win. But Bipni resisted. She screamed. She fought. Because that's what mothers do, even when they know they're outmatched. Her children were in the room. She tried to protect them, tried to shield them from a reality they were far too young to understand. And still, he raped her. There's no soft way to say it. He held a knife and violated a mother in front of her children. Not somewhere dark and distant, but in her own father's home. In the middle of the day. This wasn't about lust. It was about control. It was about a man saying, I can. And a system that's taught him he probably can. She said no, with her voice, with her fear, with her fight, and he did it anyway, because, in that moment, her body wasn't hers. It was his to take. That's what he believed. That's what too many still believe. And we ask again, if a woman isn't safe in her father's house with her children right there, where is she safe? After the assault, Bipni was left broken, bleeding, shocked, her body in pain, her mind even more so. But her suffering didn't stop with the attack. 4 men, neighbors, witnesses, people who should have protected her, chose instead to record the aftermath. Not to help, not to report, but to capture her pain like it was a spectacle. And then they shared it. The video of her trauma went viral, passed around like gossip, played on screens with no warning, no consent. A woman's worst moment turned into entertainment. What kind of society sees a bleeding mother and pulls out a phone? She wasn't a story to them. She was content. Her pain became pixels. Her fear became a file. Her privacy was erased in seconds. We talk about rape as if it ends when the man leaves. But the echo of this moment was louder, longer. It lived on the internet, where shame multiplies and empathy dies. Ask yourself, when did women's trauma become shareable content? Why do we allow this? Because when men rape and others film it, it tells survivors the truth. Even after the violence, the world still won't protect you. We failed her. Not just once, but again and again. She bled. They recorded. She suffered. They shared. And the question remains, if a woman isn't safe after she's raped, if her pain isn't even private, where is she safe? Faizer Ali didn't vanish into the night. He didn't cover his tracks. He didn't need to. That's what power does. It teaches you not to run because you believe you'll be fine. But the community saw him. Some neighbors caught him. They beat him. The rage was real. For a moment, it looked like justice might come fast. But he slipped away, escaped the village, went into hiding, and still, no urgency from those in charge. It took 3 full days before police caught him in Dhaka, not because of swift investigation, but because the public wouldn't stay quiet. He was finally arrested, but let's be clear, he ran because he knew what he did. And he wasn't afraid of the system. He was afraid of attention, of noise, of people like you listening, reading, refusing to look away. That's what made the difference. He didn't expect outrage. He expected silence. He counted on it. He thought his position would protect him, and for a while it did. The system didn't catch him. People did. We have to remember that. He ran, but we knew his name. He hid, but we kept asking questions, and he was found. But the fear he left behind in that house that didn't leave, because while he was hiding, she was still bleeding, and the question stays, if a man like this thinks he can run and still be protected, how many more think the same? After Bipni's assault, the law finally moved. A case was filed under the Women and Children Repression Prevention Act. Cybercrime charges were also brought for the video. A medical report confirmed the rape. But what about the damage the system can't measure? What about the echo in her voice? The fear in her children? The terror that lingers in the corners of her father's home? No report can write that down. The law can charge. It can prosecute. It can sentence. But can it repair? The truth is, survivors don't just want punishment. They want change. We've seen it too many times. Laws written but not enforced. Protections promised but never delivered. Survivors turned into paperwork. Cases delayed. Files lost. Names forgotten? Nah, this time, we name every step. The charges, the evidence, the arrests. We don't let it fade. Because justice isn't about the arrest alone. It's about the message it sends to every man watching, every woman waiting. Justice says, this matters. She matters. But ask yourself, how do you measure the scar of being raped in front of your children? What law can fix that? It has to start with believing, then punishing, then protecting, and most of all remembering. Because when the system forgets, the violence continues. And we say again, If a woman isn't safe, even after she reports, what message does that send to the next one? They were there, small, confused, watching their mother scream. Bipni's children didn't understand what was happening, but they knew it was wrong. You don't need full sentences to recognize terror. You don't need words to feel helpless. Those kids will carry that day for the rest of their lives. They were witnesses before they could even process what they saw, and that changes everything. The sound of her crying, the sight of the knife, the look on her face, it's etched into them now. This isn't just about one woman's trauma. It's about generational harm. When children witness violence, it scars their understanding of the world, of safety, of family, of home. Those walls were supposed to protect them, but now, they echo. We don't talk enough about that. We talk about victims and perpetrators, but what about the kids who watched and couldn't move? Who now look at every knock on the door as a threat? They saw what no child should see. Their mother violated, their world split open, and it's not just trauma, it's betrayal, because the world promised they'd be safe in their own home, and we broke that promise. Before they could even form full sentences, they learned what fear sounds like, and what silence feels like. We must ask, if children have to learn what rape looks like before they learn to read, what are we doing as a society? It wasn't just Fazer Ali. 4 more men were arrested. They weren't rapists, but they were something else, enablers, spectators. Men who saw a woman in pain and chose to hit record instead of help. They watched her bleed and pulled out their phones. They didn't call the police. They didn't protect her children. They didn't stop him. They watched. Then they shared. That's a different kind of violence. The kind that stretches her pain across screens. That makes her terror permanent. That robs her of privacy again and again. They made her rape public. And that matters. Because when we say rape is about power, this is what we mean. Power isn't just in the act, it's in the aftermath. It's in who gets to tell the story, who gets to control the narrative, who turns a woman's suffering into a file. These men weren't strangers. They lived nearby. They knew her, maybe even smiled at her in passing. But when it mattered most, they didn't see a person. They saw content, and the law finally named that. They were arrested, charged, named, because silence is violence, but so is broadcast. We ask, what kind of society turns rape into a video? And who are we becoming if we keep letting it happen? When the video of Bipni's assault went viral, the reaction was immediate and loud. Social media exploded with rage. Strangers, activists, neighbors all joined in outrage. Protests flooded the streets of Kumila. People demanded justice, safety for women, and accountability. For a moment, Bipni's pain was seen, heard, and mourned by thousands. But outside the noise, a troubling silence took hold. The officials, who should have acted swiftly, were slow. Political leaders distanced themselves. Promises of investigations echoed, but action lagged. The anger on screens did not turn into urgent protection or reform. The system moved at its usual slow, frustrating pace. This divide between online fury and offline failure is not new. It's a pattern repeated in many places, with many victims. Outrage flares up, then cools. The focus shifts elsewhere, and the survivors like Bipni are left waiting. Why does it seem easier to share a story than to fix what caused it? Why is it so simple for voices to rise, yet so hard for justice to arrive? This gap isn't an accident. It's part of a system that often values appearances over lives, where reputation matters more than truth, where silence protects the powerful, not the vulnerable. And so, the question lingers, if the world can see the violence, why can't it stop it? Bipni's attack wasn't just an isolated crime. It's part of a larger, painful reality faced by many women, especially those in minority communities. As a Hindu woman living in Bangladesh, Bipni was already vulnerable. Religious minorities often face systemic discrimination, marginalization, and threats. Violence against them is not just about individuals, it's political. This assault was fueled by more than lust or cruelty. It was about power, control, and a society that often turns a blind eye. The attacker, a political leader, used his status to violate not just a woman, but a whole community's safety and dignity. The wounds run deep. These acts are often silenced or ignored, and the silence becomes a shield that lets violence thrive. It tells women they aren't safe, that their pain doesn't matter, especially if they belong to a minority. This is a harsh truth. Violence against women is political violence. When societies don't protect their most vulnerable, they create conditions for abuse to continue unchecked. We have to ask ourselves, when will we admit that violence against women is political? Because silence is policy? Until we face that, justice will remain out of reach for too many. Bipni didn't fight because she expected to win. She fought because she had no choice. Her courage was born out of survival, not hope, but necessity. She was a mother protecting her children, a daughter hoping for safety in her father's home, a woman standing against a system that often ignores her pain. Her story isn't just about violence, it's about the failure to protect, to believe, and to act. It's a reminder that even in the places meant to be safest, women live in fear. If a woman cannot say no in her own home with her children watching, where can she? This question demands an answer. Bipni's voice echoes through the silence. She said no, that should have been enough, but it wasn't. Her story is a call to action, to listen, to believe, to fight for change. Thank you for listening. This story needs to be heard. Share it, subscribe, and keep asking, how many women have to bleed before we believe them the first time? Silence has never saved us. It never will.